The winter of 1878 had been cruel to Olivia Sutton, but nothing compared to the bitterness of watching her 6-year-old son, Tommy, shiver by the roadside as the Montana wind cut through his threadbare clothes. The broken wagon wheel beside them seemed a perfect metaphor for her life, once whole, but now splintered beyond repair. "Mama, I'm cold," Tommy whispered, his small voice nearly lost in the howl of the wind. His lips had taken on a bluish tinge that frightened Olivia to her core. "I know, sweetheart." She pulled him closer, wrapping her shawl around both of them, though it did little to ward off the chill. The nearest town, Riverstone, was still 5 miles away, and night was falling fast. Their supplies were dwindling, their hopes even more so. Olivia had been traveling west for 3 months since burying her husband George. Consumption had taken him quickly, leaving her with nothing but debts, a small boy, and a dream of reaching her cousin's homestead in Oregon. Now, stranded on this desolate stretch of road with a broken wagon and a sick child, she wondered if they'd make it even one more day. The sound of hoofbeats in the distance caught her attention. Travelers were rare on this stretch of road, especially as winter approached. Olivia stood, shielding her eyes against the setting sun. A lone rider approached, his silhouette tall and imposing against the amber sky. As he drew closer, she could make out a broad-shouldered man astride a chestnut stallion. His face was partially obscured by the brim of his weathered hat, but she could see the hard lines around his mouth, the shadow of stubble on his jaw. The stranger slowed his horse as he neared them, his gaze taking in the broken wagon, the meager supplies, and finally landing on Tommy, who clung to Olivia's skirts. "Evening, madam," he said, his voice rough as gravel. "Good evening, sir," Olivia replied, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. She'd learned early in her journey that showing weakness often invited trouble. The man dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jangling as his boots hit the ground. He stood over 6 feet tall, with shoulders that spoke of years of hard labor. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but well-kept dark trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest. A gun belt hung low on his hips. "Looks like you've had some trouble," he observed, nodding toward the wagon. "The wheel broke about an hour ago. We were hoping to reach Riverstone before nightfall." Olivia wrapped her arm protectively around Tommy, who peered up at the stranger with wide, wary eyes. The man knelt to examine the broken wheel, running his calloused fingers over the splintered wood. "This can't be fixed here, needs a proper wheelwright." He glanced at Tommy, noting the boy's shivers despite Olivia's attempts to keep him warm. Without a word, the stranger stood and removed his long duster coat. In one swift motion, he wrapped it around Tommy's small shoulders. The coat engulfed the boy, trailing on the ground around his feet, but immediately Tommy's shivering began to subside. "Thank you," Olivia whispered, emotion catching in her throat at the simple kindness. The stranger merely nodded, then turned his attention back to their predicament. "Name's Jack Hadley," he finally said. "I've got a small ranch about 2 miles from here. You and your boy can shelter there tonight. Tomorrow, I'll help you get that wheel fixed in town." Olivia hesitated. Accepting help from strange men had its risks, but refusing meant spending the night in the cold with her increasingly ill son. "I'm Olivia Sutton. This is Tommy." She managed a smile, though her lips felt stiff with cold. "We're grateful for your offer, Mr. Hadley." Jack secured what supplies he could to his horse and improvised a travois from branches and rope to carry some of their belongings. Once satisfied with his work, he helped Olivia and Tommy onto his horse. "Hold tight to the boy," he instructed, handing the reins to Olivia. Jack took the lead rope in hand and began walking, guiding the horse along the trail as darkness settled over the landscape. Tommy, wrapped in Jack's coat and nestled against Olivia's chest, soon fell into an exhausted sleep. Olivia watched the back of their rescuer as he trudged steadily forward, seemingly impervious to the cold in just his shirt and vest. "You'll freeze without your coat, Mr. Hadley," she called softly. Jack glanced back at her, his expression unreadable in the gathering darkness. "Been through worse, Mrs. Sutton. Your boy needs it more than I do." They traveled in silence after that, the only sounds the creaking of the travois, the soft thud of the horse's hooves, and the persistent moan of the wind. When Jack finally stopped and pointed ahead, Olivia could just make out the outline of a modest ranch house nestled against a stand of pines. "It's not much," Jack said as he helped them dismount, "but it's warm and dry." The cabin was indeed small, just 2 rooms, with a stone fireplace dividing them. But as Jack lit the lamps and stoked the banked embers in the hearth to life, Olivia felt warmth spread through her for the first time in days. "Put the boy on the bed through there," Jack instructed, nodding toward the smaller room. "I'll stable the horse and bring in your things." Olivia carried Tommy, still wrapped in Jack's enormous coat, to the indicated room. It was spare but clean, with a narrow bed covered in a patchwork quilt. She gently laid Tommy down, checking his forehead for fever. His skin felt cooler now, his breathing more even. Relief washed over her as she tucked the quilt around him, leaving Jack's coat in place for extra warmth. When she returned to the main room, Jack had built up the fire and was setting a pot of coffee to boil. He had also brought in her carpet bag and a few of their provisions. "Thank you," Olivia said, standing awkwardly by the fire. "Not many would stop for strangers." Jack shrugged, avoiding her gaze as he moved around the small kitchen area, pulling out cups and plates. "These mountains aren't forgiving, especially to a woman and child alone." He paused, then added more softly, "My mother and I were once stranded in a blizzard when I was about your boy's age. A Shoshone family took us in. Always figured I'd pay that debt forward someday." Olivia studied him as he worked. Jack Hadley was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30 or so, though life had clearly etched its hardships into his face. His movements were efficient. His manner reserved but not unkind. "Your boy's father?" Jack asked after a moment, his back to her as he poured the coffee. "Dead. Consumption took him last spring in Ohio." Olivia accepted the steaming cup he offered. "We're headed to Oregon. My cousin has a place there, promised work and a room for us." Jack nodded, leaning against the rough-hewn table. "That's a long journey, especially with winter coming on." "We had little choice. George's debts." She trailed off, sipping the bitter coffee. "Tommy's all I have left. I'll do whatever it takes to give him a better life." Something like respect flickered in Jack's eyes. "Get some rest, Mrs. Sutton. We'll head to town first thing tomorrow for that wheel." Despite her exhaustion, Olivia found sleep elusive that night. She lay beside Tommy, listening to his breathing and the occasional creak of floorboards as Jack moved about in the main room. Her mind whirled with questions about their taciturn host and concerns about the journey still ahead. Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through the cabin's small windows. Olivia woke to the smell of coffee and bacon and the sound of Jack's low voice. Slipping from the bed, she found him at the table with Tommy, who was sitting on a stack of books to reach his plate, still swallowed up in Jack's enormous coat. "And that's how you can tell a horse that's good in mountain country," Jack was saying. "Look at the hooves and chest, not just the height." Tommy nodded solemnly, clearly captivated by this newfound knowledge. He spotted Olivia and grinned. "Mr. Jack says I can help feed the chickens before we go to town." "Good morning," Jack said, rising to pour her coffee. "Hope you don't mind." The boy was up early and seemed hungry. "Not at all." Olivia smiled, touched by the scene before her. "Thank you for entertaining him." After a simple but filling breakfast, Jack took Tommy to see the small collection of animals. He kept a milk cow, several chickens, and 2 horses besides his own mount. Olivia used the time to wash up and tidy their belongings, marveling at how different the morning felt compared to the despair of the previous evening. The journey to Riverstone took less than an hour by wagon. Jack had hitched his team to a small buckboard, securing Olivia's broken wagon to the back. Tommy sat between them on the seat, still wearing Jack's coat despite the warmer day, apparently having adopted it as his own. Riverstone proved to be larger than Olivia had expected, a proper town with a main street lined with businesses, not just the trading post she'd anticipated. Jack guided the wagon directly to the wheelwright's shop, where a burly man with enormous forearms emerged to greet them. "Jack Hadley! Ain't seen you in town for weeks." The man wiped his hands on a rag tucked into his belt. "Been busy, Hank." Jack nodded toward the broken wagon. "Mrs. Sutton here needs a wheel fixed. How quick can you manage it?" Hank examined the damage with a practiced eye. "Spokes are shot, rims cracked, need to make a new one." He glanced at Olivia. 2 days, madam, if I start now." Olivia's heart sank. 2 more days delayed, 2 more days of dwindling supplies and approaching winter. I see, she said, trying to keep disappointment from her voice. And the cost? Hank named a figure that made Olivia blanch. It was nearly half of what remained of her carefully hoarded funds. Put it on my account, Hank, Jack said quietly. Mr. Hadley, I couldn't possibly, Olivia began, but Jack silenced her with a raised hand. You can repay me when you're settled in Oregon, he said firmly. No sense arguing about it now. While Hank got to work, Jack showed Olivia and Tommy around Riverstone. It was a mining town that had seen better days, but still boasted a general store, hotel, saloon, and even a small schoolhouse. Town's changing, Jack explained as they walked. Silver strike that built this place is playing out. Folks are turning to ranching and farming now. More families coming in, fewer prospectors. At the general store, Jack insisted on replenishing their travel supplies. When Olivia protested again, he simply said, "Consider it a loan, Mrs. Sutton. I'm investing in your journey's success." By the time they'd finished their errands, afternoon was waning. They collected the buckboard and headed back to Jack's ranch, with plans to return when the wheel was ready. The next 2 days fell into an unexpected pattern of domesticity. Olivia insisted on earning her keep, taking over the cooking and mending Jack's clothes, which clearly hadn't seen a woman's attention in some time. Tommy followed Jack everywhere, peppering him with questions about horses, cattle, and life in the mountains. On the second night, after Tommy had gone to bed, still clutching Jack's coat like a talisman, Olivia and Jack sat by the fire. A comfortable silence had grown between them. But Olivia sensed there were stories Jack hadn't told. "How long have you been here, Mr. Hadley?" she asked, her hands busy with a shirt she was mending. Jack stared into the flames. 8 years. Came west after the war with nothing but my horse and the clothes on my back." "You fought in the war?" He nodded. "Union cavalry. Joined up at 17, spent 4 years seeing things no man should see." His voice was flat, emotionless, but his hands tightened on his coffee cup. "After, I couldn't go back to Illinois. Too many ghosts there." "And here?" Olivia asked gently. A slight smile touched his lips. "Here there's just mountains and sky, room to breathe. Built this place log by log. It's not much, but it's mine." Olivia nodded, understanding the pride in ownership. Having once felt it herself before George's illness, stripped everything away. "It's a good home, Mr. Hadley. You should be proud." Jack's gaze shifted to her, studying her face in the firelight. "Jack," he said quietly. "My name's Jack." "Jack," she repeated, the simple intimacy of his first name warm on her lips. The next morning, they returned to town to collect the repaired wagon. Hank had done fine work, the new wheel even sturdier than the original. As they loaded Olivia's belongings back into her wagon, she felt a curious reluctance taking root in her heart. "We'll leave at first light tomorrow," she told Jack as they drove back to his ranch. "We've imposed on your hospitality long enough." Jack said nothing, but she noticed his hands tightening on the reins. That evening, Olivia bathed Tommy and tucked him into bed, finally coaxing him out of Jack's coat. "You'll need to return that to Mr. Jack tomorrow," she told him. Tommy's lower lip trembled. "But it smells like horses and pine trees, like Mr. Jack." Olivia smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "I know you've grown fond of him, sweetheart, but we need to continue our journey. Cousin Esther is expecting us." "Can't we stay here?" Tommy asked plaintively. "Mr. Jack needs someone to cook for him and fix his clothes. And he said I'm a natural with horses." Olivia sighed. "It's not that simple, Tommy. Mr. Jack has his life, and we need to build ours." After Tommy fell asleep, Olivia found Jack on the porch, smoking a pipe and watching the stars. She sat beside him on the rough-hewn bench, drawing her shawl tighter against the night chill. "Tommy's quite taken with you," she said. "And with your coat." Jack chuckled, a rare sound that warmed Olivia more than she cared to admit. "Boy's got good taste. That coat's seen me through blizzards and mountain storms." They sat in silence for a moment, the smoke from Jack's pipe wreathing upward in the still night air. "Oregon's still a long way," Jack finally said. "Weather in the passes can turn treacherous this time of year." "We'll manage," Olivia replied, though uncertainty threaded through her words. "We have to." Jack knocked his pipe against the porch railing, emptying the bowl. "You could wait until spring," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Winter here at the ranch. The boy would be safer. Olivia's heart skipped. Jack, I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition. He turned to face her, his expression earnest in the moonlight. The cabin gets mighty quiet in winter. Having you and Tommy here. He trailed off, seemingly unable to articulate what their presence meant to him. Why would you do this for us? Olivia whispered. You barely know us. Jack's gaze held hers, steady and sure. Maybe I'd like the chance to know you better. The simple honesty of his words struck Olivia speechless. In 3 days, this quiet, honorable man had shown her more kindness than she'd known in years. She thought of the long, uncertain road ahead, and of the peace she'd found here in this small cabin. I'll consider it, she finally said. Morning brought fresh snow and a decision. Olivia watched through the cabin window as Jack taught Tommy to form snowballs, the boy's laughter carrying clearly through the glass. Jack had given Tommy a smaller coat from his own trunk. But the boy still clutched the duster coat, refusing to relinquish it completely. Tommy, she called from the doorway, come inside and warm up. As Tommy raced toward her, cheeks flushed with cold and excitement, Jack followed more slowly, uncertainty in his usually confident stride. Inside, Olivia poured coffee for Jack and hot cider for Tommy, her mind made up, but her heart still racing with the magnitude of her decision. I've been thinking about your offer, she began, once Tommy had gone to play with some wooden animals Jack had carved. About wintering here. Jack's expression remained carefully neutral. And it would be safer for Tommy, she acknowledged. And I could contribute cooking, cleaning, mending. I wouldn't want to be a burden. You could never be that, Jack said quietly. Olivia took a deep breath. Then, if you're certain, we'll stay. Until spring. The smile that broke across Jack's face transformed him, erasing years from his weathered features. You won't regret it, Olivia. The days grew shorter as November deepened toward December, and life at the ranch settled into a rhythm that felt increasingly natural. Jack taught Olivia about caring for the animals and maintaining the cabin through the harsh mountain winters. She, in turn, brought warmth and order to his bachelor existence, cooking meals that used his stores of preserved food in ways he'd never imagined. Tommy thrived in the mountain air, following Jack like a shadow and absorbing everything the older man taught him about survival in the wilderness. The duster coat became a constant companion, dragged along on adventures and then carefully hung by the door each evening. As Christmas approached, Olivia found herself thinking less and less about the journey to Oregon. The cabin, once merely a shelter from necessity, had begun to feel like home, and Jack, with his quiet strength and unexpected gentleness, had become essential to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. One evening, after Tommy had gone to bed, Olivia and Jack sat by the fire, as had become their custom. Snow fell steadily outside, blanketing the world in silence. I received a letter from Cousin Esther today, Olivia said, setting aside her mending. Jack had ridden to town despite the weather, returning with supplies and mail. She was concerned when we didn't arrive as planned. Jack's expression grew guarded. What did you tell her? That we encountered difficulties on the journey and found safe harbor for the winter. Olivia smiled softly. She's relieved we're well, though disappointed we won't arrive before spring. Jack nodded, relaxing slightly. Spring's still the plan, then? Olivia studied his face in the firelight, noting the lines of tension around his mouth. That was our agreement. Jack rose abruptly and moved to the window, staring out at the falling snow. Olivia, he said, his back to her, I need to say something, and I'm not much good with words. She waited, her heart suddenly hammering in her chest. These past weeks, he continued, having you and Tommy here, it's shown me what I've been missing all these years. He turned to face her, his expression vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. I know you have plans, a future mapped out, but I'm asking you to consider a different path. Olivia stood, her legs unsteady. Jack, I've fallen in love with you, he said simply. With both of you. This cabin's never felt like a home until you were in it. Tears sprang to Olivia's eyes. Since George's death, she'd convinced herself that romantic love was behind her, that her life would be dedicated solely to Tommy's welfare. Yet here was this man, this good, honorable man, offering her a second chance at happiness. "I don't have much," Jack continued, "but everything I have is yours if you want it. If you'll stay, not just until spring, but for good." Olivia crossed the room to him, her heart full to bursting. "Jack Hadley," she whispered, "you have more than you know." She reached up to touch his face, feeling the rough stubble beneath her fingertips. "You gave your coat to a shivering boy by the roadside without a moment's hesitation. You opened your home to strangers. You've shown Tommy what it means to be a good man." Jack's hands came up to cradle her face. "Is that a yes?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "It's a yes," Olivia confirmed, rising on tiptoe to press her lips to his. Their kiss was tender, a promise of the life they would build together. When they parted, Jack rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if savoring the moment. A small voice from the bedroom doorway broke the silence. "Does this mean we're staying forever?" They turned to find Tommy watching them, Jack's duster coat dragging behind him like a royal train. Jack crossed to the boy and knelt before him. "If that's what you want, son." "Your mother and I were just discussing that very thing." Tommy's face lit up. "Really? Forever and ever?" Olivia joined them, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. "What would you think about Mr. Jack becoming part of our family, Tommy?" The boy considered this for approximately 2 seconds before flinging his arms around Jack's neck. "Like a paw?" Jack's eyes met Olivia's over Tommy's head, shining with emotion. "Exactly like that, if you'll have me." They were married by the circuit preacher when he passed through Riverstone in January. The ceremony was small, attended only by a few of Jack's neighbors and the townspeople who had come to know Olivia during their trips for supplies. Tommy stood proudly at Jack's side, the duster coat now officially his, by Jack's decree carefully brushed for the occasion. Spring came to the mountains in a riot of wildflowers and rushing streams. Olivia wrote to Cousin Esther explaining their change of plans, enclosing money to repay what the woman had spent preparing for their arrival. The reply, when it came, was warm with congratulations and an invitation to visit when they could. As the snow melted from the passes, Jack expanded the cabin, adding a proper bedroom for Tommy, and beginning work on a larger kitchen for Olivia. The ranch thrived under their combined efforts, with Olivia starting a vegetable garden and Jack increasing his herd of cattle. On the first anniversary of the day they met, Jack surprised Olivia with a proper buggy for trips to town, painted blue like the forget-me-nots that carpeted the meadows in spring. "It's beautiful," she exclaimed, running her hands over the polished wood. "Not half as beautiful as you," Jack replied, pulling her close. "Best decision I ever made was taking that north road home and finding you and Tommy by the roadside." Olivia smiled up at her husband, thinking of the desperate woman she'd been that day, and the journey that had led not to Oregon, but to a deeper kind of home than she'd ever imagined. Who would have thought, she mused, that a simple act of kindness, a coat wrapped around a shivering boy, would lead to all this? Jack's arms tightened around her. Sometimes the smallest gestures change our lives the most. As if summoned by his mother's thoughts, Tommy appeared from the barn, the duster coat now weather-beaten and somewhat worse for wear, still his constant companion despite its trailing hem. "Ma, Pa, can we go fishing at the creek? You promised." Jack laughed. The sound no longer rare, but a daily blessing in their lives. "So I did, son. Let me get the poles." Olivia watched her 2 men walk toward the creek that bordered their property, Tommy skipping ahead, while Jack followed at a more measured pace. The boy still wrapped himself in Jack's coat whenever the opportunity presented itself, though he no longer needed its warmth for survival. Now it was simply a reminder of a cold day on a lonely road, of a silent act of compassion, and of the love that had grown from that moment to fill all their lives with unexpected joy.